every opportunity so that you can become legendary.
What adjustments can you make right now to make yourself 1%
Your
better?
only goal is to be the best version of you.
Brian, welcome to Becoming Legendary. Special summer episode.
Thanks, Patrick. It's good to be here, man. happy summer to all those listeners out there.
Yeah, happy summer. Nice to be here. Nice to be here, probably depending upon your climate, but I'll tell you where I am. Summer's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, Arizona, it can be challenging at some points. In fact, before we recorded this podcast, I had to bump down my air conditioning two degrees, which is a big deal here in Arizona.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. All right, so we're just gonna bounce around on a few ideas, the top of our mind. Anything you want to get out of your brain before we kick in?
I think my brain is ready to go.
All right, so one of the things I've been thinking a ton about is the pending economic compression, whatever that means, whether that is a recession or a depression or something worse. And I want to kind of explain a couple of things about what has been released in company stock reports. So quarterly reports for Q1 mostly. Mm-hmm. Walmart, Target, and Kohl's, all giant nationwide retailers, basically had the same piece of economic news, which was that they all had profit compression based upon two factors. One, they were overstaffed, and two, consumers were spending less money. So that to me seems like kind of worst case scenario for dreaming of a soft landing, because what that is an indication of is that a lot of people are going to be out of jobs in the very near future. And I think that what I'm finding interesting about this is that pretty much everyone, I think, can see this coming in some way or another, and no one is actually doing much of anything to do this. On top of that, we have a war going on in Ukraine, an area of the world that produces over 30% of the world's grain. And that is going to, and it can't ship. So that is going to have a significant inflationary cost on our food products. So we are going to have higher prices, consumers spending less money, and people getting laid off in the very near future. Man, that seems like a triad of bad information coming our way. So I know you've been doing a lot of work across the great nation of America. And I'm curious if you've seen or felt any shifts yet in your experience there.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've been doing a lot of phone calls, reaching out on behalf of Sacred Plant Company, spreading the word about our newly released wholesale bulk herb program that I'm in charge of. And I've been I've called 25 states so far. So we're halfway through the United States. And I've noticed several different trends going on. Depending on, where the location is, we'll kind of leave the location, to be determined, if you will. But depending on where I'm calling, there's absolutely a noticeable shift in, number one, the amount of employees they have working there. So as Patrick mentioned, there's been there's going to be, an overstaffing that has occurred throughout numerous markets, or our whole country, really, or the whole world, maybe. So with that overstaffing means that there's less people means that there needs to be some downshifting, right? So I've noticed a lack of availability for decision makers. And that's something that's kind of like brought my world around to this perspective, meaning that that if the decision makers are busy doing other things, that they don't have the time or energy to spend on working in their specific place of business, right? So that might mean that there is an absolute shift coming, meaning that these people have to put their resources in other places, right, in order to make ends meet. So that's one huge shift I've been noticing, is the decision makers not being available and the overstaffing as well. So those are two big pieces that I've noticed. And then lastly, the other piece that I've noticed, which has been rather interesting, is the fact, or the number of businesses that seem to have reduced hours of operation. So when you go through searching for a different business on the internet, right, you can find their hours that they're open. And then they also have they have the ability to change those hours. So you can even see what the hours were before the change happened. So I've been noticing that even some of these larger retailers in the business that we work in are lessening their hours, which means there's most certainly less demand, right? Which
Yeah,
means
for
there's
sure.
certainly overhead that they can't seem to meet with the or with that they're just not really trying to meet, right? Because of the situation that they're in. So that's super interesting as well. I know, Patrick, we were having a conversation a few weeks ago about Amazon, and that was a really interesting piece that I'd like to share as well. So Amazon, as
Yeah.
we know, is the number one retailer in the world. They have started to sublet some of their warehouses, correct?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
or close their warehouses.
Yeah.
So
I forgot all
so
about that.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so it's like those days of placing an Amazon order at 6:30 at night and having the package to be delivered at 6:30 the next morning may be coming to an end. Simply because if they're closing warehouses, then that means, again, the demand is going down.
Yeah.
So and Patrick also mentioned too something that I find interesting. Some people are in the game of like changing and shifting on, depending on what's happening in their environment. And some people wait till it's the roof has been blown off.
Yeah.
So it's there's a mix of both happening in this world that we're speaking of towards. And I'm curious out there, the listeners, like this is an awareness that we're inviting you to bring into your world, right? So how does these shifts that we're mentioning, are they affecting you? Are they not affecting you? This is something that you can sort of play around with in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly don't give financial advice, but
No.
boy, I would like to be in cash right now.
Yes. Wouldn't we all?
If I was looking at my stock portfolio, I would like an awful lot of it to be cash right now. I think that, and you look at the way, I've talked about this before a little bit on the invisible path, but the way that I see opportunity in life, right? So Brian and I talked about this a little bit. Like, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, okay, pending economic compression, we're trying to manage a global business, right? How do we manage a global business while consumerism is shrinking, or consumers are less interested?
Yeah.
And the thing that I said out of that is, every single challenge presents an opportunity. So if you're looking at these indicators and you're seeing all of the red lights blinking, and you're seeing all of these warning lights, what can you do to maximize that opportunity, right? And it really depends a lot on where you are and what your awareness and knowledge is. But I do think that the stories out there that are telling you, look, we made it past, the stock market's up today. Those are traps. Those are financial traps that want to get you excited about an opportunity, but the opportunity is probably 6 to 12 to 24 months out right now. 6 months it's not possible, right? We're not going to turn around a shrinking economy in 6 months. So if you're worried about the bottom, we're not there yet. Like, we haven't begun yet because the labor force hasn't been laid off yet. And that labor force layoff is coming. when three massive, some of the biggest retailers in our country come out and they say, oh, we had too much staff, well, they're not going to tell you that next quarter. So they're going to change that story before next quarter. So we're looking at a ton of layoffs this quarter. And I think that is scary, and I also think that is a real opportunity if you find the way to make it an opportunity and you take the awareness of what you know right now today to be coming. And I think we know this is coming. Like I don't think this is a question. I don't see the bull debate here. I just, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, coming off of a pandemic where things only, people's resources in a lot of, not speaking of, and this is not a broad, assumption here. This is speaking on specific segments and people, but their incomes went up without doing.
A lot of people had way more available income for sure.
100%. And I can speak for myself that my taxes reflected that, right? From the amount of money that we got back was far less than any year we've had prior. So with that, whatever goes up must come down. So there's, and with that flux, with that shift, now is the opportunity to start the game plan. Because, how many times in your life has the economy or has the stock market stayed the same or gone up? Like consecutive years, months, very rare, if ever. So this is just a time where you can start to prepare for the future, which is something that we like to think about a lot and encourage our friends and listeners to listen to as well.
Yeah. I really do think that, I really believe you get a couple of these financial, historically in America, you have gotten a couple of these opportunities in a lifetime to take advantage of a compressive financial space. And I do say take advantage of it because the reality is, if you know something, like if you know it's coming, it is an opportunity. If it catches you by surprise, right? So my brother and I were talking about somebody who bought a very small house for a very large amount of money. And we were talking about how somebody is going to be the very last person to buy a house in a housing market, right? Like somebody is going to buy at the very, very top. Yeah. And maybe it was that person. So you don't want to be the person who buys at the very, very top, right? Like that is a bad place to be, but somebody's going to be that. So you don't take advantage of the situation if you are that person. The situation takes advantage of you, but you don't necessarily have to be that person either, right? There's an opportunity to not be that person, and that's the goal of these times.
Absolutely. There's been an interesting theme going on too as well. Locally here, I'm in Arizona, and the housing market has been going up for a couple years now, right? And now,
about a decade now.
Yeah, about a decade. Excuse me. Yeah, I missed those 8 years. So 10 years, right? It's been going up, and you can go on Zillow, or you can use those metrics that your realtor will give you about your price or the house, how much your house is worth, right? So recently ours was up, and then it just started now to downtick just a little bit. And so those metrics are forecasters, right? They're giving you information without telling you what they're giving you. So and maybe this is something that you don't need to hear, but those type of outreach in your community, in your life, and those type of metrics are information you can use to again prepare.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So get your money organized, people.
I would say, do take a look at that. Take a look at what is the opportunity for you, and try to maximize that. I want to shift gears a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit more about the like devastating the real true challenge behind the employment situation, because there's like a subwave of people that that some people are probably highly aware of, some people are probably not that aware of, which is the Great Resignation grouping, right? In a way, it's a generation. It's a bunch of people who decided that during COVID, during the pandemic, there we go, that living a life in a terrible job, in a terrible home, in a terrible community wasn't worth it. And instead of having a terrible job, living in a terrible home, they stopped. They didn't work anymore. They decided to be homeless. And that is like, whether or not you're still seeing that in the city you live in, that is a reality, right? Like you can see places around the world that homeless populations have quadrupled, sextupled, whatever it is, right? And those people are no longer, because they are not applying for jobs, those people are not tallied into the unemployment record. Because they just drop off. I think it's after 6 months. It might be more than that. It might be less than that. I don't know. But at a certain point, they're just dropped off the roll. So you have those people that no one's talking about. And then you're going to have another heaping of people that are now unemployed. And those people who become unemployed might also decide, you know what? I don't want to try to find another terrible job. I don't want to live in another terrible community. I don't want to live in another terrible renting situation where I can't afford to do it, right? The people in the pandemic mostly made the choice to just stop. These people may or may not have that same choice. And I think the challenging situation about that is we've created a society, and not you or I, Brian, because we haven't had the opportunity to shape society yet, right? Like we're just coming to the age where we have the opportunity to shape society.
Yes.
But there's a generation of people that preceded us, this baby boomer generation, that has
our
created
parents,
this.
yeah.
Our parents, for sure, have created a situation where it makes a lot of sense to drop out of society if you are on the bottom rung of the ladder, right? Because paying all your money in rent, like working 60 hours a week, working 80 hours a week, and then spending all your money that you made working all those hours is a shitty life. That's the reality, right? And like, I don't use a lot of profanity on this podcast, but that's a shitty life. And they've taken no responsibility for it. So I want to, like, I tell you very quick, I was in a car with two people of the boomer generation, and they're asking, you know, like, why millennials don't want to work and how fair that is. And I was like, well, why would you expect that they would want to work when we don't pay them enough to make a living? They could never possibly dream of purchasing real estate. That we've created a life for them that doesn't incentivize them to work. Why would you assume they would?
Sure.
And the boomer response was essentially like, no, they're just lazy. So I asked the question. I was like, you know, if you worked at a grocery store in 1980, the year I was born, you could support a family and buy a home. And they were like, no, that's not possible. That's not true. Oh, it's not true. The reality is, if you got a job in 1980 and did your part, you could live in this society. That is true and a fact. And whether you're a boomer or not, that is a reality. Yeah. So, but this is where the real problem is. So then I was like, okay, they were like, no, that's not true. And I said, okay, what do you think the average home price was in 1980? And I think they said it was 100, they assumed it was 150,000. It was like 46,000. If it wasn't 46,000, it wasn't over 56,000. Sure. Average home price in 1980, basically $50,000. You could work at a grocery store and buy a home and raise a family. And even when confronted with the fact that a home price in average was I think it was $46,000, but let's say it's 50. Even when being confronted with that fact, both of them had the exact same response. Well, the home I bought in 1980 was $100,000, which is absolutely irrelevant to the conversation, right?
Yeah.
It does not matter what you spent on a home, because this is the statistics of what it actually cost the average home consumer in 1980. The fact that you bought a home that was twice as expensive might be a good sign that you're out of touch.
Yeah. It might be you're in a different financial situation than the average person.
But
Yeah.
but what has happened is boomers have been raised in a society where if they got a job and they worked, they could have basically whatever they wanted.
If they wanted, sure.
And now they think that is the reality for people getting into the workforce now, but it is not.
No.
And until we make that a reality, I don't know why you would work. I can't imagine going to work for someone knowing that I will never be able to catch up. And I don't mean catch up as in if it's a race. I just mean be able to catch up with your life so that you can enjoy it. So that you have enough time to enjoy your life. Because if you're working 60 to 80 hours a week and you're spending all your money just to live, you're not enjoying your life. That is a reality.
So let me jump in here just for a second. There was. So I have a group. I work at Spirit of Yoga, as many of you know. I teach yoga there. I have a few friends locally here who have made interesting transitions. And so what I mean by that is we'll talk pre-pandemic, and they were, let's say working in a restaurant, working in a good restaurant, making 50, 60K a year, right? And then supplementing their other income through either teaching yoga or other sort of applications around the healing arts community. Yeah. And so a few of these people have decided to step away from society. But they did not step away with the idea of not contributing, but they stepped away with the idea of not contributing to the game that they were forced to being played, which is the game that Patrick so eloquently just described, right? So what they've done is they've downsized. They've moved in with roommates. Mm-hmm. They've sold their cars. Mm-hmm. They've moved closer to their place of business so they can walk. They have sold away, not all of their possessions, but anything that they don't need in order to simply have some sort of flexibility and some sort of availability to enjoy their life. Yeah. Right. So I found that very interesting. They are sick and tired of the trap, if you will, or again, of the game that they were being forced to play. So as soon as the pricing for everything started to go up and they started to make the same amount of money, that was a problem. So the only way that they figured out to survive with have some sort of pleasure of their day-to-day life outside of the work is to downsize. And so that in and of itself creates a lot of different things, right? For these specific people I'm talking about, a lot of times their happiness has increased, right? By shifting the way that they live their life so drastically, their happiness has increased because they have more flexibility to do things. But there was a cost for that. There was, there's a cost benefit for this, right? That's happening. They do also miss having a car. They do also miss the flexibility of taking a plane ride to visit their family in another state or whatever it may be. So there's an absolute, there's this huge mind shift of the way people look at things, right? And there's less and less people willing to step out of less and less people willing to give up on their beliefs and their aspirations. But in order to do that, they have to switch gears. So it's like this huge paradox that we're living in that is very abundantly clear in the community that I'm closest to here in town.
Yeah. All right. So this is a good leap into a topic that I had no idea we were going to get into today, but we're going to get into this idea.
I hate when he does this to me. Just kidding. Just kidding.
So there is along with this idea that millennials are lazy because they don't want to work terrible jobs. There a related, a sister idea that a universal basic income would make
Mm.
people lazy.
Hmm.
And I actually have a solution for a universal basic income for everyone on the planet that is pretty darn easy to get to. And I'm gonna lay that out in a second. But first, I just want to talk about universal basic income, because there's this idea that if everyone got $1,500 a month, no one would work. And man, that is just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. Because have you ever in your life been like, yeah, I have enough money, I guess I'm just gonna do nothing now? And if you have, that's rad. Like, I would
Yeah.
love to get to that point. Like, that's like, if it doesn't matter if the amount of money is high, right? Because we know the richest people on the planet work the hardest. They don't stop working because they have $2 billion in cash sitting in their house and another $70 billion in the bank, right? Like, it's an insane idea that anyone, that's not true, people would do it. There are people that would do it.
Mm.
It's an insane idea that the people that would do it aren't the people who are not getting a job now and are just going out and stealing $1,500 worth of stuff from people so that they can sell it at the pawn shop and freaking make $150, right? Like, those people would just not go out and steal anymore. Lazy people aren't going to get a job and like contribute in a way that's going to impact society. That is just a fact. So why not make their life easier? Who gives a shit? There's just this, like, it's the exact same argument as millennials are lazy because they don't want to work terrible jobs that will never get them ahead. And I can't understand it because when I got my terrible job, I was able to buy a home. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point, bro.
Right,
that's
right.
exactly the point.
Exactly. Let me share a personal story on this real quick.
Please.
Yes. So back when my mother passed away, and I told this story a lot of times, but my mother passed away in 2012. And so I was coming off of about 6 years in New York City, working and earning an exorbitant amount of money, that I'm very proud of, but also, it was an amount of money that I didn't quite understand what to do with. So when my mother passed away in 2012, I had talked to our accountant, our tax guy, basically, and I had him develop basically a retirement program for me, where the amount of money I made, we had listed out or built out over the course of the next 50 years. So that would have brought me to about 80 years old. And they broke down that I would have a monthly installment of X amount of dollars. And I was in a place that seemed like a pretty gosh darn good idea. I was not motivated to do much of anything, simply because of the tragedy of the loss of my mother. I was lost in a space that was just super strange. But I had figured out that I could do nothing, literally sit on my couch, watch TV from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m., do nothing for the rest of my life, not have to worry about a single thing. And that got old in about a week, to be honest. Now, did I still sit on that couch for longer than a week and do nothing? Yes, I certainly did. I'm guilty of that as charged. But there was a universal momentum that I felt driving me to get up off of my butt and go out and contribute to the world. Whatever that may be, I didn't know what that was going to look like. But what I'm trying to say is that if you are of sane mind and of a willing and open participant in this game of life that we are so beautifully gifted to live in, you will not sit on your butt for $1,500 a month and do nothing. It's not possible. We're not born like that as human beings. We aren't there. Like I said, we're talking about universal income, there's a universal momentum that exists in this world. And you have a choice. You can either be a part of it, or you can be a bystander and look into it. And I was looking into it, all I could see and notice was people having a whole heck of a lot of fun. And that's a tangible, it's one of the main principles that Patrick and I talk about all the time. Is how can we make whatever we're doing fun? So you don't have to look at like a job, even if it's the worst case scenario. I've been in shitty jobs before. There is the invitation there to be a professional in what you're doing, even if you're bagging groceries, or if you're putting together kits in an assembly line, or whatever the job is that you discuss or despise of that you've ever done before. There is an invitation to try to find a thread of fun in there. Can it just be simply that you're alive, breathing, talking, interacting, like, and having this experience? Can that simply be enough for you? So that's really, I love this idea of the universal income. And there's, for people who think that $1,500 a month will give you permission to do nothing, they're insane. They're right now, they're wanting you to do nothing because whatever you do in exchange of doing nothing is going to affect whatever the heck they're doing. So there's like an incentive or like a reason behind those words. People like separation. They like to be better than you, or like to think about themselves in a better light than you. So they're doing these things, right, to create separation, to create this.
They would rather you be worse than they be better, right?
Yeah,
like people get much more joy out of knowing your life is worse than theirs than they do out of making their life better.
100%. Turn on the news. I mean, read the newspaper, turn on the basic channel or cable channel and listen to this rhetoric that they're trying to say. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my own experience that I felt. And we all have days, right? We all have days where you don't want to do anything, or you think about, God, if I just didn't have to go to work today, if I just didn't, all these things that come up, like, but you can also know in the back of your mind that, man, whatever situation you're in, it's a heck of a lot better than the homeless population that we were referring to earlier, right? So
see, I don't know if it is. I think that's my point. My point is, if you live in an apartment that's infested with cockroaches, and you pay 80% of your monthly income to live there, and then the rest of your 20% is just there for you to survive, for you to get back and forth to your work and buy food. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that 10 hours a week? Yeah. You could go be homeless and have a better life because you're not indebted to anyone. Yeah. I think that the reality is we have made life better. Being homeless has been made better than a lot of people were living, and that is the reality and the problem.
In a nutshell, to be fair. And like, it's very interesting. I've noticed a few people in my community here locally that I recognized working in local establishments that are no longer working in those local establishments. They're on the street, homeless. Yeah. And it's for the exact reason that Patrick just mentioned. It has to be because they from what I could tell, they were functioning, contributing people to society that just got sick and tired of living in that check to check mentality.
Okay, so there's this, to go back to UBI. There's this thing that I'm pretty sure is true, but it may not be true. I've never looked it up, but I did hear a thing that Benjamin Franklin, when he died, put all of his cash into a trust, basically, and the trust earned compounding interest for 100 or 200 years, maybe 300 years. I don't know, some amount of time. But what ended up happening is Benjamin Franklin ended up donating like $10 million to the city of Philadelphia through this trust, which is something that would have been impossible for Benjamin Franklin to do in his time, because $10 million was more than anyone could even imagine would have existed. I don't know if that's true or not either, but it would have been certainly more money than Benjamin Franklin was capable of donating to the city of Philadelphia.
It sounds accurate.
Um, and utilizing that logic, I realized that we could create essentially infinite money, more money than could possibly exist. And that got me thinking, how do we do that? So I came up with this very simple, very basic idea, but I can't find a single problem in it. So I want you, Ryan, to try to find a problem in this plan. So this plan requires 1 million people donating $1,000 when they die, right? So you get about $1 billion to start with. And $1,000 out of 1 million people, right? There's 300 million people in the United States alone. This is for a global universal basic income. So you take 1 million people who donate $1,000 when they die. When they die, they have no use for that $1,000. That $1,000 is basically gone. That $1,000 is gone. Passing it on to the next generation isn't going to change their lives. It's just a waste. So can you find 1 million people to donate $1,000 when they die? Or you don't have to wait till you die, but I just think it's really easy. Like if someone said, "Hey, if you had a chance to save the humanity on this planet, would you donate $1,000 when you die?" I'd probably be like, "Yeah, I think that's pretty good plan."
What a legacy to leave. Yeah, that's rad.
Yeah, why not do that? All right, so you start with $1 billion, you put it in a fund, you need to create roughly 7 to 12% reoccurring revenue on an interest level. Should not be hard with $1 billion. And then you just wait. You wait for 350 years, and you end up with like $5 quadrillion, more money than exists. So the problem then is, right, if you somehow create $5 quadrillion, how is it not corrupted? And I think basically you only need one policy, which is this money can be distributed when it gets to this amount, right? Enough that you can provide a consistent recurring revenue stream in the form of interest, plus enough to distribute globally. But distribution has to benefit every single human on the planet equally. And as long as that policy is never changed, right? This can be distributed when it has this much, and when it can sustain itself, and it benefits every single human on the planet equally, I don't see how anyone can corrupt it. I think the initial challenges that most people come up with are, well, how would you distribute something globally? My point of that would be, why would I try to predict global distribution of anything 350 years in the future? Somebody else is going to have to figure that out, because I can't possibly foresee how distribution of digital assets will be occurring 350 years in the future. Because if you asked me in 1980 to predict computers, I would have done it. That we were having this phone call right now on a computer, I would have done a pretty bad job of that. Now, I was a baby, but I bet you a lot of people would have done a pretty bad job of that too. So, but we have all of these things coming, right? Like there are blockchain transactions that can allow these things to happen. There are alternative assets that could be utilized to get around any type of blockage, right? Because what would be one of the problems is that a government could say, no, we're not going to do this. But instead of that, you go outside, right? So we already have lots of currencies going outside of government currencies. The problem with the currencies that go outside of government currencies is not enough people to use them. So they're basically useless. You have to turn them back into real money before you can actually spend them. But if everyone on the planet was given the same currency, and everyone said, okay, well, we just got $1,000 of this currency now, we can start to have our own global economy that is self-funded and self-supportive of every human being on the planet. Now, maybe that's a real problem because maybe what we actually need for the planet itself is less human beings, and saving human beings is actually the worst possible thing we could do. I can hear that argument, but I can't hear an argument. Well, I can hear an argument. I just haven't heard one that creates a problem within this plan, because it is very simple, it is very basic, and the only thing it requires is selflessness. Because when you donate your $1,000, whether you donate it when you're 1 year old or on the day you pass away, it will not benefit you, right? This is something that will benefit humans 350 years in the future. And it's the only reason that I can think of that this doesn't happen is because nobody is willing to think about 350 years in the future, or nobody's willing to sacrifice for people that they will never meet.
Yeah. So a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So does everybody get the $1,000 in 350 years in the world? Every human, every being that's alive, no matter what the age is, no matter what their.
You don't know what the distribution number would be, but
correct.
Yes, everyone gets,
theoretically,
every being on the planet benefits equally.
Okay. My next question was going to be, you kind of answered it, but why wait 350 years? Because now I understand why, because of the selfishness piece, right? So there's got to be some form of evolution that of beings and of the way that we look at the world, the way that we interact with other beings, in order for this to happen. Because of the selfishness, if this segmentation and I'm better than you, all that stuff continues on, there's no way in heck this is going to ever work, right? So you're up against that shift. So the biggest obstacle I would think that you have to come up with is how do we then train or educate people on this idea? Is because we have 350 years to do that, but that would be my main question, or my main argument.
So I will say I didn't do a very good job of explaining the requirement of how the money expands. So you take $1 billion and you utilize the power of compounding interest, right? Like it is very important to understand the compounding interest piece of this. And if you get out a calculator and you start punching in compounding, or you punch in compounding interest calculator into Google, you can very quickly see how time and compounding interest have an exponential curve of increase. So the reason you have to wait 350 years is because the way that the interest occurs is that a huge portion of it, 70 to 80% of it, happen in the last like 50 years. Because the number as the nest of there's a word that is just blanking on me, but let's say that the account itself expands, the interest on that account expands in an equal proportion, right? So 10% of the number keeps getting exponentially bigger each year, and that is the really important part. So it does take time. It doesn't really, like, I don't care. You don't need to convince the world of this. You need to convince 1 million people of this. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. So the reality is you don't need a lot of people to actually do this. This just seems so simple and so easy. But it also takes someone will have to dedicate their life to making this happen, right? Like, it is simple and easy in the fact that it changes the potential outcome of humanity. And things that do that, I don't think are necessarily often thought of as simple or easy. But it also requires a lot of energy, because it is an energetic process to get 1 million people to buy into something like this. It is an energetic process, even though the cost individually is ridiculously small, right? And the reality is, if you could get 10 million people to do this, it gets there a lot quicker, right? So if you start with a bigger number, your numbers start compounding quicker. Your numbers start getting larger in the compounding quicker. Yeah, so I just feel like 1 million people is such a small amount of people. It is, yeah.
There's something that I'm thinking about too here. So if you take 1 million people, right? So then you have 1 million different, let's say families after that, right? So what I'm thinking about then, here's my argument, is that if I don't know how many generations that is in 350 years, but say there's a generation every 50 years. So do 50 divided, whatever that, I don't have it. Here's a calculator.
20 years.
Thank you. So you're looking at 20 different generations then, ish. So if there's a bad apple or a bad egg in those 20 generations, that person or that persons is going to conspire to take that money or to do something nefarious with that money. So there's
Well,
got to
they can't,
be.
Brian. They don't have access to that money. That money be gone. You donate your $1,000, it's gone. You don't get to touch that money again.
Okay, got it.
That money be gone. You gave that $1,000 away. It lives in a trust now.
Yeah, that's fair. So then my next argument would be then who's controlling the trust? Do you have one person? Do you have these million people? Or
Well,
just
million
have
people definitely aren't. No.
no.
So you have to have a grouping of people, and a framework and a chain of command, right? There has to be a way to continually pass that down.
Something set up.
But the reality is those people will play ridiculously important pieces in the future.
Of course.
But it's a long time in the future because you don't need to worry about any of the problems until you actually have the funds. And the funds are basically just going to sit there with no one doing much of anything for 300 plus years. Yeah. Right. So there is essentially nothing to do. And the only rule that cannot be changed, right, is the rule that is important is it has to benefit everyone on the planet equally. That is a requirement. It has to reach this much, and it has to benefit everyone on the planet equally. And as long as those things cannot be changed, right, it's I'm sure there's a way to corrupt it. There always is.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, sure.
But that makes it real hard.
Yeah,
that makes it real hard.
It does. Or if something like a major catastrophe happened where there was like the only money left on the earth and we had to use that to, I'm coming up with crazy ideas here, but I'm trying to argue against this idea. So
hey, hold on, Brian, hold on.
So bear with me.
So there's a hurricane.
Yeah.
And then money's going to be the thing.
Well, 349 years from now, right as soon as this is about to happen, a meteor hits some portion of our ocean and causes the entire western portion of the United States, all the way from California to Mississippi, to be underwater.
Yeah.
But we do have technology that is able to freeze some of that water up in some capacity. So I'm just kind of making things up right now, but I'm playing devil's advocate, right? So I think there's going to be there's one argument, which is, how do I know humanity is going to be around in 350 years? That too. And you don't, but who cares? Yeah.
The $1,000, like, it's not going to matter. I don't understand why. So my point would be, if money doesn't matter, you didn't lose anything. It doesn't, there is no, the downside is $1,000, right? So I just don't view $1,000 at the end of your life as a downside. I don't see, even if you lit it on fire, even if you had $1,000 next to you that you lit on fire, like, what is the actual impact of that going to be? It's essentially nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. No, it is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you would create a little bit of create a little bit of carbon.
Yeah.
If you lit it on fire, that's about the impact.
It's about the impact. Sure. Interesting. Looks like we got some work to do. Actually, I want no part of this responsibility. So that's an interesting one. I'm gonna have to think on that a few more times, because that's a pretty solid argument on your behalf. And
I'd love to hear anybody who has problems on it. Anything you can come up with. I will say that if your problem is, how are you going to do this 350 years in the future? My answer is going to be the same. I don't know. I'm not trying to predict how things are going to be done 350 years in the future. I'm just saying I want there to be a global funding for all of humanity to have access to equally.
Equally. That's it. You figure out the details. It sounds pretty damn simple to me.
I mean, there are lots of details. It's
Yeah.
just that it's crazy to try to predict 350 years in the future.
Sure. And but the underlying theme of the entire idea is one that I can absolutely stand on, is the fact that $1,000 for 1 million people is absolutely nothing. I mean, for you could come up with, there's 700 billion people. Is that million people on the earth, right? Million.
There are 7.5 billion people.
Billion,
roughly.
excuse me. So I mean, there's way more than 1 million people who have $1,000 just laying around that they can easily contribute that to. So, you know, there's
a lot of people who could donate a lot more than
more,
that, right?
100%. I was just thinking
a lot
that.
of people
Yeah.
have $1 million that they could light on fire in the same way that you or I could light $1,000 on fire, right? A lot
Sure.
of people have $100,000 that they could light on fire and it wouldn't make a difference to them. A lot of people have $1 billion they could light on fire.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make a difference to them.
Oh, 100%. I know.
But the billionaires are not going to participate in this. I will guarantee you that.
Yeah. Because they're not worried about that. Exactly right. Huh. Interesting. That one's got me thinking, man. That's why I appreciate you. Or one of the reasons.
Well, I like to hear, man. We hopefully everybody's thinking. Anybody who has questions on this, reach out to us, and we'll catch you sometime later in the summer. How about that?
Sounds fair to me.
Any final thoughts from you, Brian?
You know, this one was completely random, and I enjoyed the randomness of it, and I enjoyed these little nuggets that we kind of discovered along the way. There's always something out there to think about, because if you aren't thinking about, if you aren't thinking about a lot of things, or maybe you're thinking about too much stuff, right? So the invitation is to separate yourself from your thoughts a little bit more and figure out some ways that you can get some interesting information that helps question your own paradigm of thinking. That's what I think we did here today. Because I'm all going to go do some research on universal income now.
I agree, man. All the good stuff.
Yes,
Rad.
sir.
Appreciate the heck out of you, man.
Me too, brother.
Chat with you soon.